Hi everybody, very welcome to Mentour and yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. Today on the video, guys, I'm going to be talking about something I mentioned on my Instagram feed yesterday. So I put a picture up on Instagram, I hope you're following me there, of a cloud, and I asked what that cloud is indicative of, what kind of dangers is associated with it, and what it was called. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, so stay tuned.
Wind 31016, everyone right, right on in. Circle land 31 right.
Delta 260.
Right guys, so the quick answer to the question about the name of that cloud is called a lenticularis cloud. Okay, a lenticularis cloud is formed when there are wave movements in the atmosphere, and they get to form, it kind of looks like a UFO or like a lentil, and it tends to form on the leeward side of mountains where there's a lot of wind blowing over the mountains. And the reason that I put it up on my Instagram feed yesterday was because in my home base in Girona, that is indicative of a quite tricky weather phenomenon called the tramontana. So the tramontana is a katabatic wind, and what that means, it's a wind that is formed when heavier air that is located up towards the northern part of France starts falling down from France down towards Spain, and it just moves around the Pyrenees, and it accelerates as it does so. So it can cause a lot of wind, and it's especially common here during the spring and during the autumn. Now the problem with that wind, especially here in Girona, is that the wind comes over the Pyrenees and it falls down, and it creates these kind of vortexes behind the Pyrenees that can give rise to an enormous amount of turbulence. The turbulence in itself is not too bad, but another problem with this is that what tends to happen is that wind is only present up from about 500 feet up in the air and then upwards. So from 500 feet and down, it becomes still air, as in no wind at all. So when we take the weather for the airport, we get like today, but it's okay, no clouds, completely good visibility, no winds whatsoever. But since we get from our flight plans, we know what the winds are aloft, we can see that there's a lot of tailwind coming in as we're doing an approach from France in towards Girona. So what me and my first officer had to do today was do a fairly comprehensive briefing on how to deal with this, because the problem is not so much the tailwind aloft, okay? The problem is what happens when that tailwind turns to still air, and that happens at about 500 feet. What that is equivalent of is like meeting 30 knots or 40 knots of headwind suddenly, which means that our indicated airspeed will go from a nice stabilized maybe 175 knots with flaps 5 to suddenly reaching up over 200 knots in a matter of seconds. And this is something that we need to anticipate by hanging out, extending the landing gear early in order to have enough drag. So when that wind change occurs, it's pretty much like wind shear, but it happens at about 500 feet. When we have enough drag out, we'll be able to, to keep the speed under control anyway, so that we can extend the final landing flaps and get the aircraft stabilized by the landing gate, which is 500 feet. And this can be really, really tricky, and it requires you to know about this phenomenon before you go for it. Today was not too bad. We had about 30 knots tailwind down to about 2,000 feet or 1,500 feet, and then it turned around. It was quite turbulent still, but yesterday it was almost not landable, to the point of where we asked the airport to actually change to the other runway in order to get around this problem. So these are typical examples of weather phenomena that you need to know about in your home base if you're coming to a place like Girona, for example, and it helps a lot to have been based here and to have seen it before. So guys, that was all about katabatic winds, about the tramontana. I hope you liked this little short visit to the office. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and if you want these kind of stories, these short stories, make sure that you subscribe to my Instagram account. I'll link to it here in the description. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.